From translation, TLB the Living Bible this 151 day of the year. Today we are reading passages Esther 6-10, Esther chapter 6, verses 1 to 22. That night the king couldn't sleep, so he ordered the book of records, the Chronicles, to be brought and read to him. It was found recorded there how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's guards who had plotted to assassinate King Xerxes. What reward was given to Mordecai for this? The king asked. His attendants replied, nothing has been done for him at all. The king then asked, who is in the court? Now Haman had just come into the outer court of the palace to speak with the king about hanging Mordecai from a gallows he had built, which was 75 feet high. The attendants answered, Haman is waiting out there. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman arrived, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So he replied, for the man the king delights to honor, have a royal robe brought that the king himself has worn, and a horse that the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Let the robe and horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let him robe the man and lead him through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Go at once and do this for Mordecai the Jew. The king said, do not leave out a single detail of your plan. So Haman took the robe and the horse and robed Mordecai, leading him through the city streets, proclaiming as he went, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Afterward Mordecai returned to the palace gate, while Haman rushed home, mourning and with his head covered. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends what had happened, they said, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has begun, is of Jewish descent, you cannot stand against him but will surely come to ruin. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman off to the banquet Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to dinner with Queen Esther, but as they were drinking wine the king again asked Esther, Queen Esther, what is your request? It will be given to you. What is your desire? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther replied, if I have found favor in your sight, your majesty, and if it pleases you, spare my life, this is my request. And spare my people, this is my desire. For my people and I have been sold to be destroyed, killed and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I would have kept silent, for that would not be a violation to warrant disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, an adversary and an enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king was furious and got up from the banquet in anger. As he went out into the palace garden, Haman stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life, for he realized that the king had decided his doom. As the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the king spoke the word, his attendants covered Haman's face, and Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said, a gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He built it for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. Hang him on it, the king commanded. So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had built for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Esther chapter 7, verses 1 to 10. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther that day. And as they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, what is your request? It will be given you. What is your desire? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, spare my life, this is my petition. And spare my people, this is my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed and annihilated. If we had been sold as mere slaves, I would have kept silent. That would not be a reason enough to bother the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, an adversary and an enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king was furious and got up from the banquet in anger. As he went into the palace garden, Haman stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life, for he realized that the king had decided his doom. When the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the king spoke the word, attendants covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said, a gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He built it for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. Hang him on it, the king commanded. So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had built for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Esther chapter 8, verses 1 to 17. That same day King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to stop the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she rose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if I have found favor with him, and if the matter seems right to the king and I am pleasing to him, let an order be written that the evil devised by Haman be carried out on his own head. And also let my written request be granted concerning the Jews in all the provinces of the king. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and I have hanged him on the gallows. Now write another decree in the king's name in regard to the Jews as you see fit, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." So at once the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out all Mordecai's commands to the Jews, and to the satraps, governors and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These decrees were written in the script of each province, and in the language of each people. Mordecai's edicts were written in the name of King Xerxes himself, and sealed with his own ring. Then they were sent by mounted couriers, riding the royal horses, that were swift and bred from stallions. The edict gave the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed forces of any province that would attack them, including women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for this throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to all the peoples, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers, riding the royal horses, went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal blue and white, with a large crown of gold and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa rejoiced and was glad. For the Jews it was a time of joy and happiness, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Esther chapter 9, verses 1 to 32. In the 12th month, the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the situation was reversed. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities in all the king's provinces to attack those who sought their destruction, but no one could stand against them, because the people of all other nationalities feared them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the officials of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them. For Mordecai was now second in rank only to King Xerxes himself, and was held in high honor by all the royal officials and the people. He was a man of great importance among the Jews, and was accepted favorably by many of his relatives. So the Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parshandasa, Dalphon, Aspasa, Poratha, Adalia, Aridasa, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vasasa, the 10 sons of Haman son of Hamedasa, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. The number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It will be granted. What is your next request? It will be fulfilled." "If it pleases the king," Esther answered, "give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on gallows." So the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons on gallows. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death 300 men in Susa. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies, and to kill those who hated them. So they killed 75,000 of them, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. That is why rural Jews, who live in villages, observe the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving gifts to each other. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. They were to observe them as days of feasting and joy, and sending gifts of food to each other and to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the observance they had begun, as Mordecai had written to them. For Haman son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and had cast the pur, that is, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when the king learned of this, he issued written orders that Haman's evil plot, which he had devised against the Jews, should befall him, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore these days were called Purim, from the word pur, because of all written accounts of this story, and what Mordecai had written to them concerning their regulations and their customs. The Jews took it upon themselves to establish the custom, and their descendants and all who would join them without reservation, to observe these days without fail and according to their regulations and customs. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, gave full written authority for their establishment. He wrote in behalf of all the Jews to all the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Xerxes, near and far, to confirm these days of Purim at their designated times, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had decreed, and as they had established for themselves and their descendants in regard to their times of fasting and lamentation. Esther's orders confirmed these regulations about Purim, and they were written down in the records. Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Xerxes, and was held in high honor by all the Jews, and also by many of the other people of the land, because he worked for the good of all his people, and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, and it was written down in the records. Esther chapter 10, verses 1-3. King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire, to its farthest shores. All his powerful and mighty deeds are recorded in the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia, and the account of how he showed his great splendor, and how he rose to power is known to all peoples. Mordecai the Jew was second in rank only to King Xerxes, honored by many, and held in high esteem by his fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of his people, and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews.